Oh, he didn't need to do that.
He'll throw it away. Hing, Pegues.
Oh my goodness.
Kobe goes baseline and hammers it on Arkin.
And a double-digit win. Tigers of the SEC will advance.
From Arizona beating Texas for the final round to Houston beating Alabama, there have been a lot of predictions about who will win the 2023 March Madness. And if we're talking about professional opinions, it's only right to start with Gary Parrish. He's, after all, very likely to judge the correct outcome. He works for CBS as a journalist and studio analyst. We all know it takes a lot to win the March Madness. Experienced coaches and incredibly talented players. You need to have it all before you can even think of winning.
Young going in, and there's the dunk. Reese delivers it. The Terrapins take it.
There ain't no way we're going down today, and you enjoy every bit of it. Let's go. Let's go.
Gary predicted that South Alabama would reach the semifinals. As for the East, well, according to him, Purdue will dominate that particular side. From the Midwest, it would be Houston, and from the West, it would be UConn, which leaves us with the finals. Well, some predictions contradict Gary's predictions, but honestly speaking, Houston does have a very big chance of winning. As for Alabama, he thinks they'll be going against, well, they're extremely close competition. I mean, they've got Brandon Miller. That guy is no joke. But Houston definitely isn't here to play this season. This team has everything needed to win, and Gary seems to think that in the end, they'll be the ones on top. Let's just say he's not the only one. In fact, a surprising number of people have concluded that Houston will win. Matt Norlander is one of them. They predicted the same winner. I mean, they both worked for CBS at some point, but there are quite a lot of differences in their opinions on certain teams. Take UConn versus Gonzaga as an example. They both predicted that they would reach the quarterfinals in the West, but instead of UConn going against Houston, Matt believes that it'll be Gonzaga. It was the same case with the South. Both think that there will be a match between Alabama and Creighton, but instead of Alabama, Matt believes it will be Creighton going against Purdue. The former will defeat Creighton and make it to the semifinals, only to be defeated by Houston. As for the Midwest and the East, Matt thought that it would be Xavier that'll make it to the quarterfinals, but Gary opted for Texas A&M. And in the East, the former went for Marquette, whereas Parrish went for Kansas State, but that doesn't matter much. After all, Purdue dominates both of these teams, at least according to them. And well, Houston wins regardless of who it goes against. Hey, I mentioned it before, didn't I? There are a lot of people rooting for this specific team, like Kyle Boone. Yep, here we go again. Yet another person who's on Houston's side. Not that I blame them. That team has the perfect coach. Kelvin Sampson definitely doesn't take defeat lying down. And then there's Jamal Shead and Marcus Sasser. These two can guard like no other. Besides that, their scorers are top-notch too. And sure, maybe we should be a bit concerned about Marcus's injury. Hopefully he'll recover in time to lead his team to success. They're an incredible team even without him, but they'll struggle to win considerably more if he doesn't manage to join them. Now, if luck is on their side, and he does, let's just say that there is no other team that's more equipped to dominate all 6 brackets and come out on top Houston. But, well, I'm sure this team is incredible and deserves all the praise given to it. But even if it's what I've talked about so far, surely it's not the only team that can win. It's definitely the one with the most chances. But if we need to consider others, Arizona's always an option, at least according to Dennis Dodd. Now, Arizona has some chances of winning. They're a great team and pretty well-rounded. And most of all, they have Azolas Tubelis. He's one of the best paint scorers and probably in the top 10 best March Madness players. But of course, I can't say he's the only one Arizona has the chance to win. They have plenty of other good players too. The thing that's so surprising about Dennis's prediction in Houston is that, according to him, the team won't even make it past the second bracket. Quite surprising, especially considering the previous predictions. And if you're wondering who will manage to reach the semifinals from the Midwest, well, Dodd seems to think it'll be Texas, after it has defeated Indiana in the quarterfinals and Kansas in the semifinals. As for the East, well, we've already talked about Purdue and Marquette, but unlike Matt, Dennis seemed to think that it'll be Marquette that'll make it to the semifinals, only to be defeated by Arizona as it moves to the finals. Dodd isn't the only one who thinks that Arizona will make it to the finals, but unlike him, Chip Patterson Patterson doesn't think they'll win. He's putting all his chips in with Kansas taking the crown this year. Surprising, right? But he thinks it's definitely possible. It's not like Patterson didn't consider the odds, and he's considered their position. He admitted that he knows it's very unlikely for a program to win a championship, have most of their primary rotation players leave, and then compete for the title again.
What makes you tear up? What are you thinking about?
Just put in the work. This team is struggling, and we figured it out.
But he pointed out that that's exactly what Kansas has been doing. They've notched quite the record in a year where they should have been adjusting to the changes in their lineup. They managed to get a record 17 Quad 1 wins, made it to the Big 12, and became the third #1 seed in the NCAA. That's not what an adjusting team is like. Paired with the fact that UCLA is having trouble with injuries, it's looking good for the Jayhawks. Patterson also thinks they can match their style to win against UConn and Gonzaga, depending on who they're up against. Of course, they'll have to win against his West pick, Texas, which should give us quite the show. The result also depends on the other sides, with Patterson deciding Arizona will come out on top in the South, and Duke will emerge from the East. And Kansas seems to have a pretty good chance, since Bill Bender agrees with Patterson. He put the Jayhawks forward as his pick, which would make them the victor for a second year in a row. They're being coached by Bill Self again. And while they've had a few hiccups, it's nothing they can't bounce back from. They lost 2 games to Texas, and their 76-56 loss in the Big 12 championship game caused them to slide down the #1 overall seed. They'd have a chance to avenge themselves in a semifinal match since Texas is Bender's Midwest pick. But looking at the other half of the story, the stakes are higher as Bender chooses Alabama as his South pick. Duke's standing remains the same as the East pick, and for now, Bender thinks the odds are in their favor. Joel Scheyer is leading them well in his first year as head coach, and Bender thinks the Blue Devils are going places. He didn't call them arguably the hottest team in the nation for nothing. On the other hand, Mike DeCourcy introduces a new contender for the crown, Alabama. To be frank, he's unsure who will come out on top, since everything seems askew this year, but the Crimson Tide has a chance in his books. He put Duke forward as the East pick, with Texas from the Midwest and UConn from the West. DeCourcy did admit that Alabama's still dealing with a former player having murder charges while 2 players were there. In fact, he thinks they might end up being the least popular winners for March Madness ever. But we'll see, because the game's not over yet.
Closer to their ultimate dream of taking it back to a hometown Final Four. Tiger Campbell
In traffic, through traffic,
and score it.
too easy.
Well, that's all of the pros' predictions regarding March Madness.